Human consciousness is not linear. It evolves in spirals, leaps, and breakthroughs. Some people live their whole lives stuck in the first stage, and others, in a moment of clarity, pass through them all. But what makes us shift from survival mode and start seeing reality through different eyes? What makes us question what is real, what is identity, what is God? This video is not here to tell you who you should be, but to reveal the stages your soul is already moving through, even when your mind doesn't yet understand. We will go through the 6 levels of consciousness, each one with its challenges, emotional cycles, and openings. But only one stage dissolves the seeker and reveals what has always been present. What many call God, presence, truth, or non-dual consciousness. This is a video for those who are ready to stop seeking and start seeing. Some changes don't begin with clear choices. They are born from a discomfort that slowly builds up. You keep your commitments, reply to messages, try to keep everything in order, but inside something no longer makes sense. It's like life is happening on autopilot, and somewhere between what you do and what you feel, there's an empty space. That emptiness begins with irritation for no reason, a desire to be alone, a constant feeling that something is missing, even when everything looks right on paper. It's not easy to name, but it's real. Many people go through this and think it's just exhaustion, but in truth it's a calling, a silent invitation to look within, to realize that living just to survive is no longer enough. This moment is not a breakdown. It's a turning point. It's not a full awakening, but it's the beginning. It's when you start to question, to observe your own cycles, to notice that maybe there's another way of being in the world, more conscious, more true. And that's what opens the way to the first stage of consciousness. First stage, survival consciousness. This is the densest stage of human consciousness. Here, everything revolves around survival. The body leads, fear guides, and thought is limited to what is urgent. Eating, paying, maintaining, resisting. Life is reduced to securing the basics: physical safety, emotional stability, social acceptance. At this level, perception is closed off to the immediate present. Anything that threatens routine is seen as danger. The new is frightening. Change is uncomfortable. Consciousness is trapped in reactive cycles, where impulse comes before choice. It's like living in a constant state of alert, as if something could fall apart at any moment. And because of that, there is a continuous effort to control everything around, people, situations, feelings. But that control is an illusion, and exhausting. Here, the ego is still under construction, and it clings to whatever it can to feel like someone. Status, role, validation, image. Spirituality, when it shows up in this stage, is seen as a tool, something to attract what's missing or protect from what threatens. There is no openness to mystery yet, only to relief, and that's how, little by little, the next stage starts to get closer. Not as an achievement, but as a question that refuses to go away. Am I really just this? Second stage, the ego identity. After survival comes the construction of identity. It's when the human being starts to define themselves by what they do, what they have, and how they are perceived. Consciousness anchors itself in labels: profession, social role, personality. Anything that can answer the question, who am I? In this stage, the ego grows stronger, not as an enemy but as a structure. Creates boundaries, beliefs, defense patterns. It learns to adapt to be accepted. It learns to avoid to not get hurt. But while it organizes experience, the ego also limits. It starts to confuse itself with what it represents. And unconsciously, it begins to believe it is the very mask it wears. The search for recognition becomes a need. Comparison becomes constant. Personal failure turns into a threat to one's very existence. The mind becomes noisy, anxious, always trying to prove something, even in silence. This is where many people get stuck for years, sometimes for a lifetime, because this identity gives a sense of control. And in the chaos of the world, Control seems to equal safety. But there are moments when the ego falters, when something slips through the plan, when a loss, a break, a disappointment shatters the constructed image. And for a brief moment, a space appears, a space where the old no longer holds, and the new hasn't yet arrived. This space is uncomfortable, but it is also fertile. It's the ground where the third stage begins to sprout. Third stage, the break. There comes a moment when the structure starts to crack. It's not something planned, nor desired, but it's inevitable. What once made sense no longer holds up. The role you were playing starts to feel too tight, and everything you believed to be you no longer works as an answer. It's common for this stage to come with a crisis, but not always. Sometimes, it's a quiet dissatisfaction that deepens in silence, a subtle discomfort that grows stronger, until it can no longer be ignored. This is when the inner calling becomes more intense. The pain doesn't come only from what is happening, but from the resistance to let the old go. You start to notice repetitive patterns, relationships that unfold in the same way, situations that repeat with new faces, but the same lessons. It's the emotional cycle asking for integration. The mind tries to solve it, but it can't. What's falling apart is not life. It's the illusion of control. It's the attempt to hold on to an identity that no longer matches your inner expansion. In this stage, many look for answers in spiritual practices, books, therapy, teachers, and all of that can be helpful. But the essential is not outside. It's in the silence between thoughts, in the pause between one certainty and another. And, for the first time, you're not just reacting, you begin to observe. Fourth stage, the journey of expansion. This is where consciousness takes a leap. The mind is no longer at the center. You begin to notice thoughts without getting lost in them. Emotions still arise, but you don't identify with them as much. There's a space between what happens and what you are. That space is the beginning of freedom. It's also the start of a vibrational understanding of reality. You realize you're not just inside the world, but the world is also inside you. What you think, feel, and believe affects what you experience. Not like magic, but like frequency. Quantum physics calls this the observer effect. What you observe, you influence. What you believe, you reinforce. At this stage, a new kind of responsibility starts to emerge. The responsibility of caring for your own energy. You begin to notice subtle fields. What drains you, what nourishes you, what expands, what contracts. And with that, a new way of acting is born. More conscious, less impulsive, guided by intention and presence. This is a moment of great excitement. Many feel awakened here, and in a way they are. But this is not yet the end of the journey, because even here, there is still a self trying to direct everything. There is still a center, a subtle identity that wants to control the flow. And as long as that self is in charge, full surrender has not yet happened. Fifth stage, surrender. There comes a moment when thinking no longer solves things. Analyzing, planning, explaining, all of it starts to feel shallow compared to the depth of what is being revealed inside. Here, consciousness no longer tries to control the experience. It begins to trust, not out of passivity but out of clarity. You begin to see that many of your actions were just reactions, conditioned repetitions, emotional ties bound to stories that no longer need to be kept. In this stage, the cycle of action and reaction starts to dissolve. That old loop where a trigger always led to the same response. Now there is pause. Now there is choice. Surrender is not giving up. It is presence without resistance. It is acting with awareness, but without the burden of control. It is living with direction, but without rigidity. Emotions still arise, but they don't take over. Fear still shows up, but it doesn't paralyze. Pain still touches, but no longer defines. It's the beginning of integration. Everything that was once separate starts to come together. Mind, body, emotion, and presence. The spiritual and the everyday are no longer on opposite sides. Life is no longer a problem to be solved. It becomes a field for expressing what you are on the inside. There is no euphoria in this stage. There is serenity, a silence that supports, a clarity that needs no explanation. Sixth stage, non-dual consciousness. Non-dual consciousness is not a concept. It is a state where all separation dissolves. Thoughts still arise, emotions too, but they are no longer mistaken for what you are. You don't just observe the contents of the mind. You recognize yourself as the space where everything happens, as the silent screen behind every scene. Time slows down, not because the world has stopped, but because the mind is no longer trying to run ahead of life. Here, truth is not an idea. It is a living perception. Nothing needs to be understood. Everything simply is. This is not an ecstatic experience. It is simple, unpretentious, but deeply clear. You realize there was never any separation, that what we call God, life, or reality has always been present at the core of your existence. There is no longer a path to follow, nor a goal to reach. There is only what is, and what is enough. After the search, the effort, the layers undone, what remains is the essential, and the essential is not something new. It is something that has always been there, covered by the narratives of the self. You are not the character who lived through the stages. You are the consciousness that moved through them, the one who witnessed the confusion, the fear, the awakening, the surrender, and finally the silence. Everything that once seemed separate body, mind, spirit, reality, begins to reveal itself as expressions of the same source. And instead of searching for meaning in every form, you begin to recognize the meaning that everything already carries. There is no more urgency, no rush for answers, because there is presence. Here, practice is no longer an effort. It is natural. It is living with attention, with kindness, with truth. Little by little, you realize the journey was never outward, and that what we call God is not above, beyond, or distant, but inseparable from the very consciousness that now lives within you. Be still. Observe. Everything you were searching for is already here. If this video touched something in you, subscribe to the channel, like it, and share it with others who are also on this journey. And if you want, leave a comment. Which stage do you recognize yourself in right now?